the abundance, distribution, and interaction of species are directly linked to environmental structure. Plant communities in particular play a huge role. They affect variables such as habitat complexity, density, and composition, and also provide food and shelter resources. All these determine where a species can inhabit and persist. In Australia, habitat disturbances caused by humans are persistent. Clearing and grazing of land for agriculture, fire regimes, development, and logging are some examples that cause major changes to habitat structure, diversity, and complexity. An interaction of these factors has contributed to the decline and extinction of over 29 native mammal species. In short, Australia has the worst mammal extinction rate in the world. For this study, we look at the small mammals of Halidon Hills, paying attention to their habitat use and how fire and logging have impacted their ecology. The trapping schedule is shown here. A series of traps were used in 5 sites, with traps open for 3 nights at each site. All traps were checked at dawn. Opportunistic observations were recorded, and habitat complexity scores were given to each trap line. Besides the habitat complexity scores, the species abundance and species richness were also calculated for each site. On top of that, species diversity was also determined using the Shannon-Weiner index. The results showed that there was greater species richness and diversity in undisturbed sites. Places that were unlogged and had little fire history had more species present in larger numbers, also showing a greater Shannon-Weiner index. The results also showed that species richness and diversity were linked to ground height and ground cover. Species richness and diversity were the highest for sites with the most ground cover and ground vegetation height. Our small mammal responses to these impacts are usually species-specific. Species that are more opportunistic are able to adapt and recover faster. It can be seen that certain species like the yellowthroat antechinus are able to do that, while others are not. The results of Hagedorn reflect the limitations of the trapping methods. Despite being in an undisturbed site, it had the least species diversity of all the sites. This could be due to its low ground cover and vegetation height. However, Hagedorn had the most tree canopy cover, which explains the abundance of possums. This suggests a higher diversity of arboreal species that the traps failed to capture. Fire logging also affect habitat complexity. These cause landscape changes typically linked to decreased species richness and diversity. The results of the study affirms this. The undisturbed sites had the most ground cover and ground vegetation height, and also the greatest species abundance, diversity, and richness. Many habitats in Australia are linked to an interplay of fire, logging, and grazing activities. When constructing species management strategies, it would be wise to consider all these factors together instead of singularly. Ecological knowledge of the species, particularly their responses to habitat disturbance, is also important. Management, therefore, needs to consider all these variables within the landscape for efficient strategies.